All right, everybody, welcome back. It's time for The Deep Dive. And today we are taking a deep dive into the world of ethical behavior analysis.
Oh, yeah.
We're cracking open Chapter 8 of the Ethics for Behavior Analysts Handbook. And let me tell you, this is where things get really interesting.
They do.
Really, really fascinating stuff.
It's not just like rules, you know? It's gray areas and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And, those gray areas, those ethical crossroads, that's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Right.
That's where these decisions have real-world consequences for clients, for families, even for entire communities.
Absolutely. And you bring up a good point about, not just the individual.
Yeah.
This idea of stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about the client. It's about the whole network of people who are impacted by a behavior analyst's decisions.
Yeah.
Parents, teachers, spouses.
Right.
They all have their own perspective.
It's like this web of responsibility.
Yeah. And sometimes those perspectives clash.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's when things get really tricky.
Yeah. So let's jump into a hypothetical here.
Sure.
Let's say you're a behavior analyst. You're working with a client and they're making amazing progress, like fantastic progress. But then the insurance company steps in and says, nope, sorry, no more funding for those therapy sessions.
Well, I've been there.
Have you really?
It's tough. It happens more often than you think.
Really?
And it's like this immediate dilemma.
Oh, I bet.
You've got the contract with the insurer, but you also have this moral obligation to fight for your client's well-being.
Exactly. Because on the one hand, you signed a contract, right? You have this agreement.
Right.
But on the other hand, your client is thriving and they're making progress.
And they need you.
So what do? You can't just roll over, can you?
No, absolutely not. You push back.
Okay.
You advocate. This is where a behavior analyst's mettle is really tested, because it's not about just accepting what the insurance company says.
Right.
It's about advocating for what that client truly needs, even if it ruffles some feathers.
So it's like you have to be a skilled clinician, but also this fierce advocate.
Yes.
All rolled into one.
That's a really good way to put it, because you have to be comfortable having those tough conversations.
Yeah.
Setting those boundaries and sometimes even making some waves.
Right, because you're fighting for your client.
You're fighting for what's right.
Absolutely. And that fight, sometimes it extends beyond just insurance companies.
Okay.
It comes into play with things like confidentiality, which we know is huge.
Hugely important.
Foundational in this field.
Absolutely.
But even confidentiality has
It's nuances.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Because it's not just this hard and fast rule. It's not a brick wall.
Yeah.
There are exceptions,
Right.
There are ethically mandated, legally mandated situations where you have to break that confidentiality.
Right. And it's knowing when those situations apply.
Yes. And our source material actually dives into this.
Okay.
With a case study.
Oh, interesting.
About this behavior analyst who discovers these images on their client's iPad.
And these images suggest that the client's father might be involved in some illegal activities.
Oh, wow.
So talk about an ethical dilemma.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Because on the one hand, you have this duty to protect your client.
Right.
But on the other hand, you found these images kind of by accident, right?
It wasn't part of a formal assessment or anything.
Exactly. You weren't looking for this information.
Right.
So it's not like you can just ignore it, but you also weren't supposed to see it.
Right. So what do you do?
Right. And that's the good question. What do you do?
Right. Because it's not clear cut.
No.
And that's, I think, what makes these ethical dilemmas so tricky.
Yeah. Did the source material give any guidance on this?
It did.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about ethics.
Yeah.
There's rarely a simple answer.
Yeah.
It's about looking at the nuances. It's about seeking guidance from your supervisors.
Okay.
Consulting those legal and ethical resources, and of course, documenting everything.
Document everything.
So that if you ever need to justify your actions, you have a record.
That makes sense. So it's not just about knowing the rules, it's about having good judgment and knowing when to reach out for support.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that ethical practice is an ongoing process of learning and reflecting and consulting with others to make those informed decisions.
It's like this constant learning process.
It is.
Which I imagine is especially important when you're working with clients who come from all walks of life.
Absolutely, because everyone is different and every situation is unique.
Exactly.
And sometimes those unique situations lead to what our source material calls discontinuation dilemmas.
Discontinuation dilemmas.
Okay.
What is a discontinuation dilemma?
So we often think about cases ending when a client meets their goals, right?
Right.
But sometimes it's not that clean.
Okay.
Imagine a family that can no longer afford therapy.
Okay.
Or maybe there's just this fundamental disagreement about the treatment plan.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be tough.
Right, so then what happens?
Yeah, because you can't force someone to continue therapy if they can't afford it. But you also don't want to abandon a client in need.
Exactly. It's a tough situation, and it happens more than you think.
So how do you even begin to navigate that ethically?
Well, the source material emphasizes that discontinuation should always be a last resort.
Okay.
You've exhausted all other options.
Right.
But even then, it's not just about washing your hands and saying, okay, we're done.
So there's more to it than just saying goodbye.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's an ethical way to discontinue services.
Okay, what does that involve?
Well, you need a plan.
A plan.
A written plan for discontinuation.
Okay.
To ensure a smooth transition for the client.
So referrals, maybe?
Yes, referrals to other providers if appropriate.
Okay.
And just minimizing any disruption to their progress.
So it's like you're breaking up with them, but in a compassionate way?
I like that analogy because it really highlights the need for care and consideration even in those final stages.
It's like you're saying, it's not you, it's me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're still prioritizing their well-being even as you're stepping back.
Wow, who knew that ending a professional relationship could be so complex?
It's true. There's an art to it, and it's definitely something that requires careful consideration and a lot of empathy.
It really highlights how much thought and care goes into every aspect of ethical behavior analysis.
It does. There's so many layers to it.
It's not just about the technical stuff. It's about navigating these human relationships and these ethical gray areas.
It's about being a good clinician, but also a good human.
I like that. A good human.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
It really is amazing, right? You think about all the different factors, all these ethical considerations. It really makes you appreciate the thoughtfulness that goes into being a behavior analyst.
It's true. It's not a job for the faint of heart.
Speaking of thoughtfulness, let's talk about documentation.
Okay.
Because I know it doesn't sound as exciting as, say, an ethical thriller involving drug pics on an iPad.
Right. Less dramatic, maybe.
But our source material really stresses just how vital meticulous record keeping is.
It is. It's foundational.
Yeah. But why? I mean, it seems like something that could easily fall by the wayside when you're juggling complex cases and advocating for clients and all the other things you have to do.
I get it. It can feel like just another task to check off the list. But here's the thing. Documentation isn't just about ticking boxes.
Okay.
It's about protecting everyone involved.
Protecting how so?
Well, think about it. Detailed records, they provide this clear, objective account of the services, provided the decisions made, any challenges encountered.
So it's like an insurance policy almost.
Exactly.
If there's ever a question about the course of treatment, you've got those records to back you up.
Precisely. And it goes beyond just legal protection, too.
Okay, how so?
Meticulous documentation. It ensures continuity of care. Imagine a client transitions to a new provider.
Okay.
With thorough records, that new provider can hit the ground running.
That makes sense. They don't have to start from scratch.
Exactly. They understand the client's history, the interventions that have been tried, the progress that's been made.
So it's like passing the baton seamlessly.
Exactly. And that's what we want. We want what's best for the client, and seamless transitions are a part of that.
It makes you realize that even something as seemingly mundane as documentation is infused with ethical considerations.
It is. It's all connected.
Speaking of ethical considerations, there's this one case study in Chapter 8 that really jumped out at me.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
The one about the behavior analyst who's writing session notes during the client's therapy session.
Oh, right. Yeah. That one sparked some debate.
I bet. Because on the one hand, we're all slammed for time.
Right? Oh, tell me about it.
And documentation is essential. But on the other hand,
the client deserves your undivided attention.
Exactly. It's their time.
Yeah, it's their time to be fully present and engaged.
It's like trying to have a heart-to-heart with someone while they're scrolling through their phone.
Right. You just know they're not really there with you.
Exactly. You can just feel it.
And that's not the experience we want for our clients.
No, not at all.
We want them to feel heard and seen and understood.
Absolutely. And that's hard to do when you're busy scribbling notes.
It is. It's about finding that balance between efficiency and attentiveness.
Because I imagine it takes time to write those detailed session notes.
It does. But it's about making sure that the client's well-being and their experience of therapy always come first.
Right, because that's why they're there.
Exactly.
But let's be real, sometimes those good intentions get tested.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you factor in the pressures of the job.
It's true. There's a lot to balance.
And Chapter 8 talks about this idea of caseload size and how challenging it can be to find that sweet spot between serving clients effectively and taking on more than you can handle.
It's a constant juggling act.
I bet.
The demand for behavior analytic services is growing, which is fantastic, but it also puts pressure on practitioners to take on more and more clients.
Right, because you want to help as many people as possible.
Exactly. But at a certain point, something's got to give.
So how do you strike that balance? What's the magic number when it comes to caseload size?
I wish there was a magic number, but it's much more nuanced than that.
Okay.
The BACB, our credentialing body, offers some guidance.
I do.
They consider factors like the complexity of the cases, the experience of the analyst, the availability of supervision.
Oh, wow. So many factors.
It's a lot to weigh, but it's about making sure that we're practicing ethically and responsibly.
And I imagine those BACB guidelines come in handy when you're feeling the pressure to take on more than you can reasonably handle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're a great resource, and Chapter 8 emphasizes that it's not only okay, but essential for behavior analysts to advocate for themselves and their clients by pushing back against unreasonable demands.
So like setting those boundaries again.
Exactly.
But this time it's with your employer.
It is. It's about recognizing that quality of care should always trump quantity.
Quality over quantity. I like that.
We have a duty to protect our own well-being so that we can show up as our best selves for our clients.
Because if you're burned out and overwhelmed, you're not going to be effective anyway.
Exactly. Everyone loses in that situation.
That makes me think about the power dynamics at play. Because it's one thing to have those BACB guidelines, but it takes guts to actually enforce them.
It does.
Especially when you're dealing with employers who might prioritize profits over ethical practice.
That's why it's so important to work for organizations that align with your values.
Absolutely, because you want to be on the same page ethically.
Right. It's about creating a culture where speaking up about ethical concerns is not just tolerated, but encouraged.
Where it's welcomed even.
Yes. And that culture starts at the top with organizations prioritizing ethical behavior and supporting their employees in making those tough calls.
So it's like this trickle-down effect. The organization sets the tone, and then everyone feels empowered to speak up.
Exactly. And that transparency is not just crucial internally, it's essential when it comes to financial agreements with clients.
Oh, right. Chapter 8 talks about that financial transparency.
Transparency is key in all aspects of this work.
But it can be tricky, right? Because money is always a bit of a sensitive subject.
It can be. But it's crucial to have those open and honest conversations about finances from the very beginning.
So no surprises down the road.
Exactly. No hidden fees, no surprises, just clear, transparent communication.
Because, let's be real, the funding for behavior analytics services can be a bit of a tangled web.
Oh, tell me about it.
Insurance companies, government programs, private pay.
Sometimes it's a combination of all of them.
Right. That's a lot to navigate.
It can be confusing for clients, and unfortunately, in some cases, it can create opportunities for exploitation.
And we've seen it, right? Those clinics that advertise those crazy low rates just to lure people in.
Oh, yeah, the bait and switch.
And then they hit you with all these hidden fees later.
Or it pressure clients to continue services long after they're really needed.
Taking advantage of vulnerable people.
It's not. Right?
Yeah.
It's exploitation, plain and simple.
It really is. And that's why this chapter 8 is so important, because it really emphasizes that informed consent. It's not just about the therapy itself, it's about the financial obligations too.
Absolutely. Clients have the right to understand what they're paying for,
right,
how much it's going to cost, and what your options are if they hit a snag.
Yeah.
You know?
If they run into financial difficulties.
Exactly. No surprises, no shady business, just clear, upfront, honest communication.
Because that's how you build trust.
Exactly. Trust and transparency. Those are the foundations of any good therapeutic relationship.
And speaking of trust, one of the case studies in this chapter really brought this issue to life.
Oh, which one? The one with the behavior analyst who uncovered those unethical billing practices at their clinic?
That's the one. It was like something out of a movie.
It's not as uncommon as you might think, unfortunately.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes those ethical lines get blurred, especially when profits are involved.
So what's a behavior analyst supposed to do in that situation?
Well, it's a tough spot to be in for sure.
Because you've got your loyalty to your employer.
Right, but you also have your ethical obligation to your clients.
And those two things are at odds.
Exactly. It's a classic ethical dilemma, but our source material is clear. Ethical obligations always come first.
Always.
You have a duty to do what's right, even if it means going against your employer.
So what do you do? Stage a dramatic whistleblowing expose?
Hold on now. It's not always about going straight to the authorities, at least not at first.
Okay.
Chapter 8 recommends a more measured approach.
Like what?
Start by trying to resolve the issue internally.
To talk to your supervisor.
Exactly. Express your concerns. Advocate for transparency with clients.
Appeal to their sense of ethics.
Right. Remind them of their professional obligations.
And if that doesn't work,
then you escalate. Report it to the BACB, or if you feel it's necessary to protect clients from harm,
you go public.
Exactly. It's not always easy, but advocating for ethical practice sometimes means taking risks.
It takes courage to stand up to your employer, especially when your job is on the line.
It does. But that's the thing about ethics. It's not always convenient.
Right. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard.
Exactly. And that commitment to ethical practice isn't something you just learn overnight. It takes time. It takes mentorship.
Especially in those early career stages.
Absolutely. That's why supervision is so crucial.
Having that guidance.
Yeah, having someone in your corner who's been there before, who can offer a fresh perspective when you're wrestling with those tough decisions.
It's like having an ethical sounding board.
Exactly. Someone to bounce ideas off of, to get feedback from before you make a big decision.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
It really has.
Who knew there were so many layers to ethical behavior analysis?
Right. It's so much more than just memorizing a set of rules.
It's about navigating human relationships.
Understanding power dynamics.
Challenging ourselves to do better.
Absolutely. And that commitment to doing better, it extends beyond our work with individual clients. It's about our role in society as advocates for access and equity.
For social justice.
Exactly. We can't just sit back and accept the status quo. We have to use our knowledge and our skills to make a difference.
To create a more just and equitable world for everyone. And it starts with each of us, right? In our own communities, in our workplaces, in our personal lives.
Absolutely.
Ethical behavior analysis, it's not just a job. It's a way of being in the world.
Beautifully said. It's about living our values, walking the walk, and inspiring others to do the same.
And on that note, dear listeners, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the ethically charged world of behavior analysis.
We've explored those complex dilemmas, unpacked those real-life case studies, and hopefully sparked some thought-provoking conversations along the way.
Remember, this isn't just about memorizing a set of rules. It's about cultivating an ethical mindset that guides our every decision.
And never underestimate your power to advocate for positive change, whether it's for your clients, your colleagues, or the field as a whole.
So until next time, keep asking those tough questions, keep pushing the boundaries, and keep striving to make the world a more ethical and compassionate place. This has been The Deep Dive, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive into a new and fascinating topic.